Thank you so much for the kind introduction. This is a thought experiment which I always try to play with myself, and perhaps, I'll allow you to do as well. Imagine that you have type 1, I hope it doesn't happen in real life, but imagine that you have type 1 diabetes yourself, or someone close to you, right? Maybe a close family member, or maybe somebody who you are taking care of very closely, develops type 1 diabetes. Second, money is not an issue. And third, you know everything what needs to be known about this field, and as most of you do. What kind of treatment would you do for yourself or for your close family member with type 1 diabetes? And in the next few slides, if I have type 1 diabetes, or if someone close to me develops type 1 diabetes, this is exactly what I'm going to do. Right? And that's what we are going to discuss in the next few slides. So we are going to talk about journey to closed loop insulin devices. Where are we in India? So what's a closed loop insulin pump? Now, the human body is designed in a very intricate way, right? You have the pancreas, which is a very sophisticated organ, and we have so much technological advancements. You have machine learning, you have AI, and yet we have not been able to replicate the beauty of the pancreas, right? So remember, your pancreatic beta cell itself, every beta cell is a closed loop device in itself. It has a sensor as well as a process to release insulin in response to the glucose level. So that is what we are trying to replicate with this machine, right? So what this machine does, or what a closed loop device does, it senses the glucose through the continuous glucose monitor. It communicates with the insulin pump regarding the current glucose level, and based on the glucose level, the insulin is released, and then the cycle is completed. So it's a closed loop. This is a closed loop device. I think a real life example of a closed loop device would be our air conditioner. Switch on an air conditioner, you set the temperature to, let's say, 26 degrees, right? And if the temperature increases, the air conditioner will start and it will bring the temperature down. If the temperature reduces, the air conditioner will stop and bring the temperature up, right? So the same way, this is what a closed loop device does. It senses the glucose through the CGM and then communicates with the pump to deliver the insulin. So this is a closed loop insulin device. Now, of course, we can make it more sophisticated. And remember, I told you that almost every single beta cell is actually 1,000 times more sophisticated than any device we have been able to manufacture. Also, remember, apart from beta cells, there are also alpha cells. There is glucagon, which is an opposite action which is there in the human body. So it's a very sophisticated system, and we have tried our best, but so far we have not even come close to it, right? So that's the challenge which we are all facing. So the JDRF has divided 6 levels of closed loop insulin device. So there was a consensus conference where they looked at what to call as a closed loop device, and then talked about what are the various generations of closed loop device which can develop, right? So there are 6 generations. So anybody who is interested in closed loop should know this classification. So the first one is what is known as a very low glucose insulin off pump. It's a very simple device. What it does is when the glucose goes low, the pump gets shut off, right? Very simple, right? So if the blood, let's say you set the threshold to 60 milligram per deciliter. So if the blood glucose goes to less than 60, the pump will shut off, right? We have this pump available in India. It's called the Medtronic VO. Well, most of the pumps that we have are from our sponsors right now, Medtronic. So most pumps, majority of the pumps in India available are through Medtronic. So we'll be mainly talking about those pumps. Then you have the hypoglycemia minimizer. What it does is it has a predictive threshold suspend. So when the blood sugar is crashing towards the low side, then before it goes to low, it switches it off, right? So it means that, let's say you are going to meet an accident. Before you meet an accident, you press the brake, right? Not after you meet the accident. So that is what a predictive threshold does. So if the blood glucose is rapidly falling, right, then the pump can predict that this is what is going to happen, and it shuts off the pump before the patient goes into hypoglycemia, right? So these are the two things, right? These are the first generation pumps. And then you have the second generation pump, and that is what in India we are currently at the second generation. So that is stage 4 pump that we have, that is automated basal or hybrid closed loop device. Now, the earlier generation pump can predict hypoglycemia, but they can do nothing for hyperglycemia. So if your blood sugar goes up, then you have to manually intervene. But now currently we have 670G in the US and 780G both in US and India, which is available in India. This is the hybrid closed loop device. So what this does is that if your sugar goes low or it's going towards low, predictively it shuts off the pump and reduces the insulin dose or closes it. But if the sugar goes high, it can calculate, recalibrate the dose and increase the basal insulin dose, right? So this is a automated basal or a hybrid closed loop device. And then the next generation would be a fully automated insulin closed loop device. Now remember, currently a 780G pump, which we have available in India, can only control the basal insulin rate. It can only control the basal rate. But if you're going to have a meal, if you're going to eat something, then you'll have to input what you're going to eat, right? The carbohydrate content of that, and manually take the bolus, right? So the bolus is still manual, but basal is automated. But the next generation pumps, which is generation 5, what they'll be able to do is that they would also be able to, predict how much bolus of insulin to give based on what glucose you are going to take, right? We talked about machine learning today and how we could, predict the glycemic response to foods, as we already, a lot of work has been done in that, right? So that when integrated with your existing basal pump, right, can automate this entire process. And this is, imagine, this is what our primitive human body has been doing for many years, right? Not only in us, in almost all the mammals, right? So we are far behind nature in terms of technology. That is what I would say. And finally, we will have the fully automated multi-hormone closed loop device, which is generation 6. Interestingly, the clinical trials have already been published for similar pumps, right? So generation 6 looks like a hypothetical scenario, but there are published clinical trials on generation 6 pumps. One of them is known as islet. It's of course not available in India yet. But what it does is it has multiple hormones, just like your human pancreas. It has glucose, it has insulin, it has glucagon, it has, other hormones also you can incorporate. And what it can do is that, based on the situation where you are, if your glucose goes low, then of course it will shut off the insulin, but it also release glucagon, right? And vice versa. So it can do multiple of these things, and that's a third generation pump. So, I talked to you about the thought experiment that if you or your family member develops type 1 diabetes, what would you do, right? For me, it's a no-brainer, right? I'll straight away call the Medtronic guy and say that, give me a 780G pump today, right? And, take my money, right? It's like that, right? But, that's what we'll do. Unfortunately, a lot of our patients do not really go through that route. It's like this, that, if I put you in the middle of the sea, right? There are 3 things you can do. One, of course, you can say that, yeah, kuch nahi hoga sakta mera, right? I'll just sink, right? Second, maybe you will swim and you will try, ke kuch to karke life bache, right? Maybe, maybe you'll succeed, maybe you'll not, who knows, but at least you're trying, right? And there's the third category which says that, I don't want to sink also, I don't want to swim also. I want to live, but I don't want to swim, right? So they'll pray that, yaar, Bhagwan bacha lo, right? So, it's like that saying that, Bhagwan bhi aake bole 3 baar to maine boat bheji, but you did not take that boat, right? It's like that. So, the same thing, unfortunate to say that lot of our patients with type 1 diabetes, this is what they're going through, they're praying for a miracle to happen. The thing is that the miracle has already happened, right? They're not seeing it in front of them. So that is what is really a problem. But the second challenge is that the speed of development of these devices is extremely slow. And you can understand why, right? So anybody who has, had any correlation with any pharma company, how much time it takes for a drug to develop, right? You have the phase 1 clinical trial, phase 2 trials, phase 3 trials. The same amount of time takes for a device also to develop, right? And a device which is updated also takes time, right? It has to go through a long series of regulatory process, right? And these drugs, they're so expensive. They also take the cost of the research which is involved in that when you are paying ultimately, right? The same thing also happens with electronic and medical devices. If I put a pacemaker in you, right? You are not only paying for the pacemaker, but you are also paying for the amount of money Medtronic has done for research for making that pacemaker available to you, right? So in that sense, drug discovery is faster in a sense because it's a mass production device, but insulin pumps and other things, though these companies are interested, the development is very slow because it is very expensive and the end users are very small number, right? The number of type 1 patients, if this disease was for a large population, you would have, very sophisticated pumps already available in the planet, right? But unfortunately, you are dealing with a minority which unfortunately do not have much purchasing power also. So frustrated with this kind of situation, there were a lot of parents who were put in the middle of the sea and they decided that enough is enough, we will not sink, we'll try to swim, right? And they launched a movement which is called Do It Yourself, right? It's something which is very proud to say that on 8th September 2022, one day prior, one of these initiatives, which is called the Open APS project, Open Artificial Pancreas project, published an article in New England Journal of Medicine just one day prior to this lecture, right? This is perhaps the finest example of how patient advocacy, right, can help change the lives of the patients themselves, right? These are normal people, parents like you and me, who probably thought that, I want to do better for my child, and if the companies are not doing it, I'll start doing it myself, right? And this is what ultimately happened. So this was a do-it-yourself movement or DIAPS movement, and they got together with a simple hashtag called "We Are Not Waiting," right? And there's another movement called DDads movement, right? Well, there's a lot of contribution done by DDads. DDads are dads of diabetic patients, right? And how they have contributed to the world, right? So what is DIY? DIY is do it yourself, right? So what these people said that if these companies are not going to make artificial pancreas or sophisticated pumps, we'll do it ourselves. So what they did was, right, like I said, regulatory issues hamper the process of development very slowly, and the development is very costly, right? So end of the day, a 780G pump still costs you about 7 to 8 lakh rupees, right? But if you're a programmer or you're a biomedical engineer, if you can make an app or a device yourself, maybe at a cheaper cost, you might be able to do a better job, right? So there are some examples of these DIY things which have really been successful, and the first and the most simplest one was what was known as a Night Scout device, right? So what these people did, right? And now it seems very intuitive, that it was very simple, but at that point of time when this started, it was not that simple, right? So what happens is that the CGM device which you have, right, it reads the glucose value, right? But this glucose value is stored in the device which you're using. What if you could take these values and put it on a cloud, so that, let's say, I am a father of a type 1 child and my child is playing, right? Or child is in another city living in a hostel, right? If I could look at her sugar values sitting at home, how simple it would be for me, right? It's a simple life for me. So that is what they did with Night Scout. So this is actually a DDAD, right? A father of a type 1 girl whose child actually went to college. And what he did was he hacked the CGM device, he put the data, put it on cloud, and he could then sit at home and access his child's data and feel safer and could intervene if the child develops severe hypoglycemia or hyperglycemia, right? So this is Night Scout. They opened a Facebook page, believe you or not, right? Social media is very successful in that sense. They opened a Facebook page, got people together, a lot of people contributed to this, and now it's actually a easily available project called the Night Scout. You can use any CGM device and convert it into, take the data from that and put it on cloud. As a parent, you can sit at home and monitor that, right? The other one, perhaps the most successful one, is this guy. What you see here is called Edward Damiano. Edward Damiano is a biomedical engineer himself, right, from Boston University. He said, he's a father of a type 1 child. He said, if anybody in the world can do it, I can do it, right? I have access to Harvard. I have access to the best technology. I am a biomedical engineer myself. If I can do it, if nobody else can do it, I can do it, right? So he started working on this called ILET, right? Again, ILET, there have already been publications for that in New England Journal of Medicine. ILET is the world's first bihormonal artificial pancreas which uses insulin and glucagon, right? Initially, they started with a standard Medtronic pump and used a software application which they developed, but now they actually made a device, and this device is going to be approved very soon by US FDA and going to be available in the markets very soon. There is another company called the Bigfoot Biomedical Tech, which was started by 3 DDads, and they, make simple devices. For example, they have recently made a pen cap which works with any insulin pen, right? When you attach it to that, it will guide you how much dose of insulin to take, which makes it very simple, right? We already talked about Night Scout. And there's something called Riley Link. Riley Link is a device which interconnects the iPhone with the insulin pump, right? Now, with this device, your iPhone can then communicate with the insulin pump, right? So these are all initiatives taken by patients themselves. These are not companies. These are not Medtronic, or these are not Abbott. These are normal people like you and me who have taken initiatives to help their own children, right? And then hence help the society as well. So to make a DIY pump, right? Let's say you want to do it yourself. You need 3 things. You will need a CGM, you will need a pump, and you will need a smartphone or a computer which can connect the two, right? So a CGM device, the data from should be read. So you take the data from the CGM, put it on a cloud, which can be done through Night Scout. There are also many apps currently available called Glimp for Android, or you have Spike for iOS, which you can use. You can use third-party devices which can convert this NFC into Bluetooth, like Bluecon, etc. The pump should be loopable, right? Which means, and Medtronic will not like it, you require an older generation Medtronic pump. Why? Because older generation Medtronic pump could be hacked, right? Newer generations cannot be, right? So you hack the older pump, right? And then you communicate, you replace the software and use your smartphone to control the pump, right? So this is what was DIY, right? So again, like I said, there have been DIY protocols. Remember, you require software as well, right? You require somebody to say that how much insulin should be delivered based on the glucose, and this is done by 3 open source platforms. One is called OpenAPS, the other is called Android APS, and third one is called Loop. And the Create trial, which was just published yesterday, was using OpenAPS, right? So this is open source. Open source means anybody can contribute. You and I can also, if you know a little bit of programming, can help move this movement forward. So where do we stand as far as closed loop device is concerned, right? So we are actually very happy that in India we have perhaps currently the most advanced commercially available insulin pump, that's the 780G, right? We have it available in India. Of course it is expensive, right? Nothing which is good comes cheap, that's for sure. But this is something I always say whenever I talk about insulin pump. If you have a child, right, this pump costs 7 to 8 lakh rupees. Any car you take, right? Even, a simplest Maruti Alto highest version probably will cost you 6 to 7 lakhs, right? So, when I have parents come to me, right, middle class parents like you and me, who come and say that, sir, 7 lakhs we cannot afford, right? This is what I tell them. If you can afford a car, I'm sure very well you can afford a pump, right? This pump will actually make a bigger difference to your child's life than the car, right? That's as simple as that, right? So that is the important thing. It is definitely expensive. I am sure not everybody can afford 7 to 8 lakh rupees, but at the end of the day, it really changes the life of patients. You're seeing time in range improve like, miraculously. We of course have small but significant, participation in the DIY movement also. In fact, very interestingly, Dr. Jyoti there has a detailed article on DIY. Right, you can go through that, it's easily available, right? A beautiful article on the entire aspect, right from history to the current status of the DIY app. And you have Jazz here, who uses a DIY pump herself, right? So it's a photo taken from perhaps I think Diacare Con only somewhere, maybe a couple of years back, right? So we have some participation as far as the closed loop is concerned, but unfortunately we are still very far away. And I'll tell you, we have a lot more potential. And what's really hurting me is that unfortunately, the potential is much more than what we are really doing, right? So where can we go from here? And again, we have a tremendous pool of talent in the engineering space. Almost, you take any society, you might take my own building, we have 15 engineers in our building, right? Or some 15 people who have done some engineering degree, right? Everyone has, family members who are engineers, right? So once my brother-in-law is an engineer, I talked to him that, we're talking about CGM devices. And he said, this is very basic technology. Aato koi bhi kari shake. So simple, right? But then why are you not doing it? That's the question. You have so many seats for biomedical engineering. Where is the Indian pump? I don't see it, right? Where is the Indian Medtronic? Where is the Indian, Abbott, right? We don't have that. Why is it, right? I don't know, right? So we have a lot of engineering talent and they really need to work with clinicians to make devices which are useful to real life people, right? The technology from these pumps is very basic, right? Even your smartphone is 10 times more sophisticated than any Medtronic pump, right? It's that big a problem, right? Thankfully, our regulatory systems are very friendly, right? It's a loophole, right? But to get an approval is much easier in India. And if we have this available, why not do it, right? It's much more complex and difficult. I had some friends who wanted to start a company in the US, some healthcare technology. I told them, don't do it, right? You will burn your fingers, and now they're burning their fingers and they're coming back to me, right? It's very expensive, difficult. You need lawyers, you need, advisors, a lot of things in US. In India, it's much more simpler, right? Of course, if we do this, we'll be leading the way in the field of diabetes technology, just the last slide, and not following the West. We should be the leaders, right? In terms of numbers, we have a huge pool of type 1 diabetes patients. We have, a lot of engineers, we have a lot of brilliant doctors, right? Why are we still far away? So we should be leading the way, and we should, we need better coordination between the engineering and medical field for this to happen, right? And all this seems very trivial, but, let me tell you, as of 2022 September, the most number of paper published, right, comes from China, right? China, a country which doesn't even speak English, have maximum number of medical publications published every year since the last decade, right? 10 years back, they had almost nothing. If you search for any literature right now, almost every NEJM copy you pick up, any Lancet copy you pick up, you'll have one article from a Chinese consortium, right? they are swimming, they are not sinking, they are not praying, right? They're swimming. And that is what we also need to do. And we have, like I said, could be the leaders in the technology space. You know, we might not be leaders in perhaps other spaces, right? But in space of technology, we can definitely be the leaders, right? So the take home message is, this is what is a closed loop device. So there are 6 generations of artificial insulin, of what is known as artificial pancreas or closed loop devices. We have a few pumps in India, 620 and 640Gs and 780G, which are available. And we have some participation in the DIY movement, which could be much more. The do-it-yourself movement, it's a changing device. You know, this is changing the device and industry. I think, you know, a lot of participation from the open systems, and it's going to, you know, like I said, we are really taking this forward. And most importantly, we have, I think this is the biggest pain point. We have a lot of potential, and we definitely need to do more, right? Not just follow the West, lead them, right? And we need to have a better coordination between engineering and medical field for this to happen. Now, we are very happy that, you know, we have the DTech Accelerator today, where you know, the organizers are connecting the finance system with the, you know, with the startups, right? But we of course need much more coordination in this field to have, you know, better participation here. Thank you for your patience.